All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ, up there in
New York City.
Fangraphs Jon Tayler, as he takes a swig of, what is that, iced coffee?
It was just a smoothie.
Smoothie?
Peanut butter smoothie.
How is it?
Peanut buttery.
Okay.
So it's good. I like peanut butter smoothies, especially with banana. Great. Always a working combo. Can never go wrong with that.
Okay. Yeah, because you're not a coffee guy either, John.
No, I'm not. I don't drink coffee. I don't like the smell. Don't like the taste. Don't really like anything about it. I'll have an occasional chai latte. That's about as close to coffee as I'll ever get.
Okay.
But
I like it, John. Well, we'll talk about some other things in New York that we don't necessarily like, unless you're a Red Sox fan, which you kind of like. I don't know. Well, who knows what Red Sox fans are feeling right now about the state of the New York Yankees?
Fine, mostly fine, I think. I mean, look, when you're no longer in last place, that helps. That's always a good thing.
The AL East, man, it is a juggernaut.
It's a gauntlet.
It certainly is, and it's time for America's favorite edition here on this very show. John, your take of the week this week is?
I think the Orioles actually might win the AL East.
Oh, wow.
Because,
look,
man, it has been a rough go of it lately for the Tampa Bay Rays. But so right now we're recording Wednesday, the evening of Wednesday, July 19th. The Orioles beat the Dodgers today to avert a sweep. The Rays lost the Rangers today and were swept by Texas, which means that percentage points wise, for all intents and purposes, the Rays and Orioles are now tied atop the American League East. So really, I don't think I'm even really going out on that much of a limb at this point because, I mean, granted, and we can get into the projections later, it's effectively a coin flip between these two teams going forward. I don't, you can maybe make an argument that if, say, Toronto gets really hot, they're not entirely out of it. They're only 5 games back. Dropping a little further back, you have the Red Sox now 8 games back. The Yankees 8.5 games back, pending their game tonight against the Angels. And I should say Toronto also has to play a game tonight against the Padres. But again, Orioles and Rays now tied atop the AL East. And I have kind of a hard time seeing at this point why I should be favoring the Rays over the Orioles, in particular because the Rays pitching staff has fallen apart. But although I should note, when I say fallen apart, and these are just looking at numbers since the start of July, because this is when the Rays have really, really started to struggle, is in the month of July. Team rotation ERA since the start of July. Baltimore, 5th in the majors at 3.22. Tampa Bay, 17th in the majors at 4.45. Granted, and this is where I want to jump in, Tampa Bay's rotation has a FIP of 321 and an xFIP of 3. So the suggestion here is that they are getting beat badly thanks to some bad luck because they have a good strikeout rate, a low walk rate, actually kind of a high home run rate, a really high batting average on balls in play, and a really bad strand rate. Their relievers are not stranding runners as effectively as possible. But regardless, when you look at the current state of the Rays rotation right now, it's a little frightening. I gotta say, it is a little frightening. Beyond Zach Eflin, Shane McClanahan, and Tyler Glass. I mean, I know Taj Bradley's getting better. There have been a lot of injuries. That's particularly the case also for the bullpen. Again, I know we talked about this before with the Rays, where I think I made the argument that they, if they want to be real contenders, they need to invest more in that pitching because so far they've had to deal with so many injuries that all of their depth has been essentially wiped out. There's not really much in the way of viable depth for the Rays going forward. If you look at our roster resource page, they have lost Shane Baz, Drew Rasmussen, and Jeffrey Springs for the rest of the season, and Springs and Baz for longer than that. They are down currently Garrett Cleavinger and Andrew Kitteridge. I assume Kitteridge is done for the season because of Tommy John. He underwent last June. Cleavinger may or may not be back at some point before the beginning of the season, but obviously not a major impact guy anyway. Beyond that, you look at who's available in the minor leagues for them. Luis Patino, who has just never really has not been able to make the transition to the majors so far. You have Jalen Beeks, Ryan Thompson, Trevor. I mean, these are more middle of the bullpen guys. There's just not a lot here for the Rays beyond what they already currently have. And granted, McClanahan, Bradley, Glasnow, Eflin, pretty good starting four, and I think you could say on paper a better starting four than what the Orioles currently have right now, which is Kyle Gibson, or starting five, I should say, Kyle Gibson, Kyle Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, Tyler Wells, Dean Kramer. Wells has been hit up a little bit in his last few starts. Gibson, of course, is no one's idea of an ace. Rodriguez back from the minors, got hit up pretty bad by the Dodgers in his first start back. Granted, it's the Dodgers.
Big disparity between his FIP and ERA. Like
True.
7 point something ERA, and his FIP's like in the threes, low threes.
Which, I mean, that suggests that there's some regression positively coming there, but at the same time, maybe this is the better way to structure this take. I think the Orioles win the AL East if they go out and add a pitcher. Because I think the Rays are vulnerable. I mean, I have thought, great, they got off to that great start, but every team is vulnerable because everyone, no matter how well or how badly you're playing, there is some regression coming in your future. The Rays were not going to be a 110 win team forever, right? And that right now we have them projected to finish the season 94-68. Although that's before today's. This is as of this morning, so this isn't taking into account today's games with Tampa and with Baltimore. We have Tampa projected to finish with 94 wins, the Orioles to finish with 90 wins. Part of that is that we have the Rays facing a somewhat weaker schedule going forward. Regardless, though, we have the division odds 60% to Tampa, 22% to Baltimore, 14% to Toronto, and then the remaining 3.5% distributed between the Yankees and the Red Sox. I don't think Tampa I think Tampa is genuinely vulnerable here. I think there is room for the Orioles to make this work if they go out and do the thing they need to do, which, as I said, is they need to add a pitcher. They need to add some kind of starting pitcher because on top of that, they have a great bullpen. They have a lineup that's now just overflowing with great young hitters. They called up Jordan Westberg. They called up Colton Cowser. They have more guys really than they even know how and where and when to play at this point, but obviously those things sort themselves out in some capacity or another. What they need is a number one caliber starting pitcher to take these starts down the stretch, to start postseason games for them, especially because if they do not win that division, they're going to be a wild card team. They're going to need that number one starter more than ever. This is the time for them to do it. So consider this, I guess, a hybrid take. The Orioles can win the AL East if the Orioles go out to get a pitcher. So I'm saying the Orioles need to go out and get a pitcher. They have to go do that as soon as possible. Every game matters for them. They cannot wait till the August 1st trade deadline. They should be burning up the phones right now to go do something. There is a real opportunity here for them to make a move. A real, genuine opportunity, just like there was last year, except to a lesser extent. Obviously, infamously, understandable to a certain extent, but very dishearteningly in total. They passed up on that opportunity last year and said they sold. They have to buy this summer. They have to. You cannot let this collection of talent, even if it is early in this group's contention cycle or whatever. One, that's no excuse not to go out and try to do something now, especially given how deep that farm system is for Baltimore. They can move guys and not really miss them in the future. Two, you don't know how long that contention cycle is going to last. You have to take advantage of it whenever you get the chance. This Rays team is struggling right now, in large part because they just have run out of pitching depth. This is a time to try to make a move, try to create some distance, and see if you can't make that division run. You have to go for it. So I guess that's the sum total of my take. The Orioles have to go for it. There's no reason for them not to at this point. There is no excuse now. They have wiped out what was an enormous lead in the division for Tampa Bay. Now they have to finish it off and take advantage of it.
I imagine the Orioles and the Rays front office this summer is just going to be like a real life version of the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other and just like because they're really operating in the same kind of way, and both have kind of become contenders in the same kind of way. And obviously the Rays have been doing it for significantly longer, but one of them is going to have to do something. One of them is going to have to make a big now move. I think the Rays slide makes them far more interesting this summer, and it's just funny to think how quickly things can change because we were in April and May, and obviously with their unbelievable start, like the division's over. Like it's just over. And
they were up. I think the max they were up in this division, I'm just looking it up now, 6.5 games. Yeah, 6.5 games. And granted, that was not an enormous lead. And credit to Baltimore for keeping that number relatively manageable. You know, the Orioles, sorry, the Rays never got this up to a double-digit lead. Never got it past 6.5 games on the second place team. Baltimore has held tight all season long. They've erased that deficit. You know, I think when our odds are updated tomorrow morning, you're probably going to see Baltimore get a decent little bump. Our projections, I think, it's mostly just our projections don't like Baltimore, I think in part because they don't like Orioles starting pitching. Our projections...
Well, you know what your predictions do like? 4 playoff teams in the AL coming out of the AL East.
Which you can understand, right? That makes sense. But you look at the projections going forward for the rest of the season for the Orioles. We have a projected 4.15 ERA for Kyle Bradish, 4.35 for Kyle Gibson, 4.13 for Dean Kramer, 3.99 for Grayson Rodriguez, 4.54 for Tyler Wells. That more than anything is why the Orioles have just, as per our estimate, and I imagine it'll go up, but I can't imagine by any huge amount. We're still probably only going to give them a 25% chance of winning the division, even though they are effectively tied for first place in that division.
But the main thing is they're a playoff team. Like, I don't think they're, like, barring some... You know what I think, too? When you look at this lineup, I mean, one of the best in the AL. Like, everyone outside of Mateo is hitting for them. Like, I guess Mountcastle, too, but, like, that's about it. All the regulars are hitting and matching, and we'll see who comes up this summer, but, like, they could be buyers there. Like, I don't know. Would you look at it this way, John, where you're like, look, if all of our arms are around 4, maybe Grayson Rodriguez figures it out, because I think he has the highest K percentage of any of their starters off the top of my head. I think his K percentage, I mean, not all of us cannot be Spencer Sanders, and shout out for Michael Ballman writing that one in Fangraphs this week about his historic K percentage run here for Atlanta. But like, there's 2 schools of thought, right? You could either buy and just go, look, we're not going to solve the pitching stuff. This like a Marcus Stroman is not going to change our postseason fortunes or whoever. But what we could do is make life living hell by adding another big bat in this order and just banking on a really, really deep group, a really, really deep 9-man lineup. Like, what if we did that? What if we did not go with Adam Frazier at second base come playoff time? Like, I think that might be more interesting to me.
I think, though, that the option there is instead, okay, let's go with Jordan Westburg, you know, or let's plug in Ramon Urias where we can, if we're committed to Gunnar Henderson.
Fernando Tatis Jr.
You know, and this is like what I said with, and granted, you know, the Orioles did suffer a blow today with Cedric Mullens going in the injured list with a groin issue for the second time this season. That is a real problem for them, given the very important role he plays on this team. But, you know, we have, you know, going forward with our projections, we have, I guess, I mean, if I'm trying to replace anyone in that lineup, it is probably Frazier. But again, that, if anything, is why you brought up Jordan Westburg. You know, I feel like at that point, you just let him get that run for the next couple weeks, see what you get there. I also don't really think that there are any notable impact bats that are going to be available on the market anyway. It really does look like it's pitching right now. You know, it is, you know, you look at where a potential impact second baseman could come from if you're the Orioles. I mean, it'd be really funny if the Yankees do a soft sell and the Orioles come up to them and are like, how do you really feel about Gleyber Torres? But assuming that's not going to happen, and I don't know that it will, you know, is getting Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals going to change anything long term for you if the Cardinals decide to sell on him? You know, the Mets extended Jeff McNeil. I don't see that as a realistic option. You know, by our projections, through our depth charts projections, the Orioles rank 17th in projected wins above replacement for the rest of the season from their second baseman, Frazier, Westburg, Ramon Urias, and a handful of lesser guys. But of the 16 teams above them, I don't really see where they're going to get someone who's going to really notably improve on that projection. And of the teams below them, the same thing holds. You know, I'm sure the Mariners would love to get rid of Colton Wong if they could, but Colton Wong isn't going to do anything for the Orioles that Adam Frazier already could. Similarly with the Red Sox and Christian Arroyo, the Royals with Nicky Lopez, you know, the Nationals with, well, they wouldn't give away Luis Garcia, but, you know, I do think that, yeah, maybe there is some way for the Orioles to finagle a way to get a bat, but in my mind, who is it? You know, who is the hitter that exists on the market right now that the Orioles can realistically acquire based on cost and on the selling team. I think we talked about this last week. You look at the potential sellers, none of them really have much in the way, particularly of bats available. Pitching really seems to be the thing on the market right now. And I think that's a more important thing for anything than the Orioles, because their starting pitching, again, is just an unpleasant mess right now. Again, based on our depth chart projections, we have the Orioles at number 25 in the majors going forward for the rest of the season with 4 wins above replacement. That's worse than the Reds. That's worse than the Tigers. That's worse than the Cardinals even. That's worse than the White Sox. And already, that's worse than the Cubs. And already I've started naming teams where they're, like, again, Stroman is not a guy who's going to make the Orioles World Series favorites, but he is a guy who meaningfully shifts the odds for them to be maybe AL East favorites, and at the very least significantly lock in their chances of getting a higher postseason slot. Similarly, if they could convince the White Sox to part with Lucas Giolito, even someone like Jordan Montgomery off the Cardinals would be a substantial improvement over the back end of their current rotation. Even a guy like Michael Lorenzen, even a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez, former Orioles prospect, and this is the thing. The Orioles do not need to go out there and swing a Max Scherzer type deal. And I don't even really think that's realistic, but they don't have to go to the Mets and say, what do you want for Verlander? What do you want for Scherzer? Would that be really cool? Sure, but they don't need to do that. Get Stroman, get Giolito, get Eduardo Rodriguez. That already on its own might be enough, coupled with maybe another kind of lower end of the rotation starter a la Rich Hill, to give you some depth and give you some potential balance. That's all I think that the Orioles realistically need to do. And I think that that's probably where they're going to focus their efforts. But they've just got to go ahead and do it. They can't waste this opportunity with this team that they have, particularly given that this is their opportunity basically to set themselves up as the dominant team of the AL East going forward. Especially when you look at that roster, when you look at all the young players that they've brought up, when you look at their farm system, it's really hard to argue against the Orioles being that number one team in the division going forward for at least the next few years, assuming things play out the way that, everyone in Baltimore is hoping that they do.
It's a fair point. It also leads us to a question I have, because Shohei Ohtani, now the rumors are coming out. It's like, are the Angels listening to Shohei Ohtani offers? And I think it was a athletic piece outlining who have the best realistic options to trade for Ohtani. Maybe been Jim Bowden in the Athletic, but number one was the Rays.
No, they're not going to. No, come on.
But he's not re-signing. Like, they're not giving him the god. Like, we know that if you trade for Ohtani and you're Tampa Bay, and it doesn't really matter, because I think it was in the piece that it was like, it doesn't matter who trades for him, even if the Dodgers or whoever, he's still going to free agency. Like, he is dead set, no matter what, he's going to free agency this winter. No one could put together a better mid-season trade package that makes sense for Los Angeles than Tampa Bay. And if you're Tampa with this all-time great start, just about better than, outside of Houston and Los Angeles, the other one, the Dodgers, the good one, no one does a better job replenishing the farm system, trading prospects, and just developing this never-ending just pipeline of talent. You would have to give up a lot for Shohei Ohtani if you're Tampa Bay. But we've seen the best iteration of the Tampa Bay Rays this year. And that best iteration is the best team in baseball. If you are worried about the rotation, you're worried about some injuries piling up, why would you not just go all in for once and bet on you being able to replenish this pipeline and just give one real shot to win the World Series? The
cost is just too high. The problem with trading...
Would you not do it if you're the GM of the Rays?
Probably not, no. Because, and this is the problem, all you're getting is 2 months of Shohei Ohtani. That's it.
What if it wins a title?
It probably won't. That's the thing. Like, it is unlikely that Ohtani makes that much of a difference for the Rays, particularly given that their playoff position is, like you said, they're in the postseason. It would take a disaster that we've, like, on the level of, like, half the team contracting, like super COVID for the Rays not to make the postseason at this point. I don't know what a trade package for Ohtani would look like from the Rays. I imagine it would just be them saying take 4 of our top 10 prospects and go from there. Mm-hmm. But I don't think look, they never deviate from this plan of theirs, and I don't think they're going to start now, because I also think that the cost for Ohtani would be greater than any single player who has ever been dealt in Major League history. Which again makes no sense, because all you're getting is 2 months out of him. And particularly if you're a team like the Rays, who you know you're not going to re-sign him, there is no chance in hell Ohtani is going to stay in Tampa Bay. It's a 2-month rental that improves their World Series odds a few points. And look, I don't normally argue from this side because it feels stupid and I don't like it. But if you're the Rays, and this is this, like, what that hot start, that historic start, wasn't about we have to take advantage of it, we have to make the most of it, this is our chance. That hot start was more about, okay, that has given us so much more room for error when it comes to making the playoffs. And from there, who knows? I think most teams honestly treat the postseason as if it's just a matter of dumb luck. And I think if you want proof of that, you look at the Phillies. The Phillies last year had no business getting as far as they did in the postseason. They did because they got hot at exactly the right time. Granted, they got hot with the talent they had on hand, but at the same time, that talent they had on hand was good for what, 82 wins all season? There's no real way to predict or project what your performance is going to look like in the postseason. I think you could say the same of the Rays last year, or especially the Rays of 2 years ago, who went into that ALDS with Boston as overwhelming favorites and got their asses handed to them in the process, in part because they ran out of starting pitching. Does Ohtani help that? Sure. Does someone like Marcus Stroman help that? Pretty much just as much for probably 20% of the cost? Also sure. I think Ohtani would have made... And this is why I also don't think Ohtani will be traded, because the time to do it was last year. The time for the Angels to do this was last year, because then he would have still had the full season under control. And a guy like Shohei Ohtani isn't valuable so much just because of what he can do for you in the postseason, which admittedly is just 4 at-bats a game and 1 start a series, maybe. It's for what he does over the course of the entire season, particularly when it comes to now you have to roster 1 fewer player because Ohtani does 2 things. There is some value that can be measured over that. I find it kind of similar to the way that Mike Trout was treated with regards to the true value of Trout makes itself apparent over the course of a full season, when he puts up 9 wins above replacement and is basically worth a 3 or 4 win increase on his own from whoever he'd be replacing on a base level. Those wins matter during the course of the regular season. I genuinely do not think that Ohtani is and granted, and I say this about Ohtani, I think this is true about just about everybody. I don't think Ohtani is the level of difference maker where if you're the Rays, you sacrifice 4 to 5 years of team control of guys who are going to be like instrumental to what you're doing going forward to up your chances of winning the World Series from 8% to like 11%. Because that also just doesn't mean anything. Those numbers aren't hard numbers in that they don't make the Rays, it's not like every other team is like, oh, well, now the Rays are more the favorite. It just means that they have slightly better odds in all the projections going forward, in all the simulations going forward, I should say. I just, when it comes to an Ohtani trade, I'll believe it when I see it, but I just don't think it's going to happen, because I think the Angels are going to ask for too high a price for a guy that most teams are rightfully going to come back and say, we're going to get him for 2 months, and then he's walking. There's no team that's going to be able to trade for him that's going to get to keep his services long term, except maybe I think the Dodgers would be the only team where you could convince me that they would then, immediately after the season is finished, turn around and say, okay, Shohei, here's $500 million, don't go anywhere. I think that's the only team that could make that argument.
I think the Mets might. They're desperate enough. I think Cohen's...
I don't think Ohtani would want to be there. If you're a major league marquee free agent, why on earth do you want to deal with being on the New York Mets? Ever.
Money.
I don't think there's enough of it to make up for that, ultimately. And the other part of it is the Mets are not a contender.
Yeah.
Like, they've pretty definitively shown this season that there's more they need to do than just Shohei Ohtani.
But you got to look at it from Cohen's brain. You got to look at it from some of the, because we're looking at it from our perspective of the outside looking in. I wonder, because Ohtani, you're just getting a little bit of draft compensation. That's what you're looking at if you're the Angels, if he walks for nothing in December. I don't know if they have all that much leverage anyway, John. They've kind of screwed this up to the point where I'm like, I think you have to no matter what, because if you even have a 20 to 30, if you have a 10% chance belief that Ohtani re-signs with you this winter, You have to do it. Even if you have I think you could go up to, for me, 80% that he resigns. I still probably move him because he's just such he is going to be the best player to ever grace that organization in our lifetime, John. He's going to be the greatest Los Angeles Angel of our lifetime. If you lose him for a little bit of draft compensation this winter and that's it, that's devastating. Like, that is absolutely devastating. And I understand on the flip side, teams are not willing to give up a crazy, like a Juan Soto type package plus, like a Juan Soto on steroids package for Ohtani when he's only going to be there for 2 months. But I think if you're the Angels, you might have to, when we get really, really close, those last 48 hours, you're going to have to make some concessions because you just can't do this in the winter. You cannot lose him for draft pick compensation. You have to get something because whatever you do trade Ohtani for, it'll still be a whole heck of a lot. And you've got to do something. You're not making the playoffs. It's over. Like, I don't think you can sell that to the fans. I think you have to sell hot. Like, I don't think there's a path for them not to, in my estimation. I think it's GM malpractice to not trade Ohtani.
I mean, I have a hard time arguing against all of that, but I just have such a hard time seeing the matchup happening, in part because I mean, look, I'm reading Jim Bowden's piece, and I'll be entirely clear too. Part of this is I think Bowden is a moron of the highest order who just blatantly makes shit up. Like, he's an idiot who doesn't know what he's talking about the great majority of the time. The whole Ralph thing that happened with him like a million deadlines ago should have been the end of his career. If not that, skimming bonus money from prospects when he was a Nationals GM really should have been the end of his career in baseball. He should have been absolutely 100% Capolella'd. He should not be in the sport anymore. And granted, that has nothing to do with Shohei Ohtani. That's just my intense dislike of Jim Bowden and everything he represents. With that having been said, yes, if it's a matter of what is the best return we can get for Shohei Ohtani, the Angels should trade him 100%. But again, my thing is, I don't think there's going to be a team willing to meet the offer or meet the price that they're going to be asking. Because in their minds, if all they're going to get ultimately is draft pick compensation, then why not shoot for the moon? Why take 75 cents on the dollar? What does it matter at a certain point? You know, if that's what's facing them at the end, then they'll just take that at the end. They'll take what they can get. But I don't think a team should make up. If you're going to make that trade, you have to come out of it the way that the Nationals did with the Juan Soto trade. You've got to bring in minimum 4 or 5 prospects of that caliber to make that trade worth it long term. And that deal only happened because Soto still had another full season of team control beyond the being dealt at the deadline. To say nothing of the fact that he did not have. But you would
still guess, though, that Ohtani would bring in a pretty amazing package for Los Angeles, even with the 2-month.
I don't think so. I really don't think so. Deadline rentals simply do not bring that kind of talent back anymore. It just doesn't happen. You look at the Max Scherzer Trey Turner trade in terms of because both of those guys, Scherzer at the very least was a deadline, was a rental. Was Turner a rental at that same deadline?
I think. Well, no, didn't he?
No, because he played 2022 in Los Angeles as well. So that one doesn't even. Yeah. Well, I think what would have to be like even that one though brought back Josiah Gray and Keibert Ruiz, a mid-rotation starter and maybe a starting catcher going forward. That's not that big a haul, honestly. Like, what would the equivalent of that be from the Rays if they were to make that trade right now with the Angels? You look at our prospect list for the Rays, that's probably something along the lines of Mason Montgomery and, I don't know, Kyle Manzardo. I don't really know that means anything for the Angels. Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, I don't think it's possible to get the value back for Ohtani, essentially, that he represents. I think there's a certain paradox in play for him. He's always going to be worth more than any team is willing to trade in exchange for him. And that's particularly the case when 90% of the teams in Major League Baseball who would be in on Ohtani know already from the beginning when they trade for him, he's not staying here. You know? Like if I'm the Rays, and the Angels call and say, hey, we'll give you Ohtani if you give us, I'll give the names out of Bowden's paragraph, like Junior Caminero, Kyle Manzardo, and he says Vidal Brujan, but that doesn't even feel like that much to me. Genuinely, that does not feel like you're really even getting what you should be getting in exchange for literally Shohei Ohtani. I think the problem with the Angels is, again, they should have done this last year if they were going to do it at all. They have screwed this up so badly that I don't think there's any way they can recoup the value necessary to make that trade worth it. I think that, it feels like I'm trying to argue two sides at the same time because on the one hand, you're right. It is GM malpractice not to have the Shohei Ohtani era end with simply draft pick compensation. Yep. On the other hand, if you put him out on the market, you're probably not going to get the offer you want. You are probably not going to get what you were looking for in exchange.
But you have to take it. You have to just take whatever the best version of that is.
I don't think that's the case, though. I don't think that's the case. I understand that again means the Angels, all they're getting out of this is draft pick compensation. But I don't know, man. Like I just have a really hard time seeing them deciding we'll take 65 cents on the dollar for him.
I agree. I just think you have to. I think it's just you have to swallow. Like you just have to swallow this. Like it's gonna hurt, but you just gotta suck it up and you gotta move forward because you did this. And then also trade Mike Trout. Just do the full on. Trade them both. Now that would be like just also, trade them both.
Can I just get one more shot in on Bowden before I'm done? This sentence, The Rays aren't satisfied with being the best team in baseball in terms of wins per dollar spent. All they care about is finally winning World Series. Citation needed. When on earth have the Rays cared about winning a World Series? They don't give a shit if they win the World Series or not. I guarantee all 30 front offices do not give a shit if they win the World Series or not. All they're trying to do is put themselves in position to win a World Series. Because all of those teams, minus the Rockies...
I think AJ Preller wants to win a World Series.
I mean, I think AJ Preller is a little bit of a loose cannon in that regard, but I think even AJ Preller would tell you the best we can do is put ourselves in position to win a World Series. There is no way to guarantee you win a World Series. Zero. No way at all. No way at all. None. And so I think, when it says, oh, now all they care about is winning, no, they don't. They don't care about winning a World Series. They do not care. They care about making the playoffs. And that's the other thing for me with the Rays. With or without Shohei Ohtani, they make the playoffs. Does getting Ohtani give them a better shot to win the World Series? Yeah. Does it give them like a guaranteed chance to win the World Series? No. I think it makes more sense for a team like that's close. Like the Mariners would genuinely make far more sense to me as an Ohtani trade partner because he makes a difference for them now and in the postseason. The Rays do not need Shohei Ohtani right now.
But if you're a Rays fan, why not, right?
No, I mean, if you're a Rays fan, you should be sending like next day delivery letters or whatever to the Rays front office in wherever the heck it is, some cardboard box in St. Petersburg, like just begging them to do this, but they're not going to do it. I mean, again, these guys are all a bunch of weirdo finance arbitrage guys.
But
they
what would
don't
you put
do
the
this
odds?
stuff.
What would you put the odds that they do it?
Of
Or
Ohtani being
percentage?
traded or of the Rays getting Ohtani?
The Rays being the one to trade for him.
2%.
That's depressing.
I look.
You don't think they'll go full Brewers here? Zach Greinke, CC Sabathia style?
No team does that anymore. That's the thing.
Yeah.
No one does that anymore because all of these teams think in exactly the same way, which is that they want to have the largest possible base of young, cost-controlled guys possible, and that they don't want to spend them, particularly on deadline rentals, even if you're talking about the second coming of Babe Ruth. Because all you're getting out of it is 2 months of baseball that the Rays, even if they lose this division lead to the Orioles, are still going to make the playoffs. And he doesn't meaningfully change anything for them, particularly given that what they need is not a front-of-the-rotation starter. They have two of those guys already in Zach and Shane McClanahan and Tyler Glasnow. What the Rays need more than anything is a top-of-the-line reliever. Maybe they could also use some starting pitching depth, but I think if you're the Rays, you're more likely to go after someone like Eduardo Rodriguez than you are Shohei Ohtani. Rodriguez will cost 10% of the prospect price of Ohtani and probably be worth. I mean, we'll pull the numbers just because. I'll pull those projections back up. Eduardo Rodriguez for the rest of the season is projected to go. Is projected to have a 3.77 ERA and a 3.73 FIP with 1.1 WAR. Ohtani for the rest of the season, a 3.25 ERA, and 1.7 WAR. So we're talking about a half wins difference, which really amounts to nothing over the course of a 2-month season. He does not meaningfully make, and great, okay, I should note though, that is purely on offense, or purely pitching wise. Add in what he does as a hitter, that's a whole nother conversation. But the Rays still have one of the best offenses in baseball. That's not what they need either, particularly given that Ohtani is only going to DH. And when it comes to what the Rays have at the DH spot, they're already pretty well set there. I mean, they're working with Harold Ramirez, Yandy Diaz, Luke Ray. I mean, their mix and match, part of it too is their mix and match lineup is predicated on positional versatility and flexibility. And Ohtani, at least as a position player, offers none of that. He is only a DH. That is all he can be at any given point in time, which is not a knock on him. It's just what he is. Again, I think it makes a lot more sense for Seattle, which not only could use another starting pitcher behind Luis Castillo, or along with Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, and Brian Wu, especially given that Wu is probably a guy who they're going to have to innings limit at some point, but also because Mariners DHs are arguably the single worst in baseball. And I think the other part of it is the bigger impact Ohtani has is as an offensive player. As a starting pitcher, he's only getting on the mound every 5 or 6 days. As an offensive player, he's taking at-bats every single day from here until the end of the season. So I think it makes a lot more sense, too, for a team like Seattle because they would be able to utilize him in the most valuable way to them, which is to say, as a hitter, and also, of course, they get the value of him starting. But I think the Rays are much more likely to go after mid-tier pitchers and relievers, and maybe an extra bat somewhere else to stock in there, maybe an extra outfield bat, maybe someone else to try to plug into that DH rotation, maybe some options for the middle infield if they don't like what they currently have. I think you could make an argument that the way Josh Lowe has slowed down, maybe they could look for some corner outfield help, but I just don't see Ohtani as being the move. That would feel like a really weird allocation of resources to me for the Rays. I think it makes a lot more sense for fringe contenders like the Mariners, like the Giants, the Padres, although I don't think the Padres have the prospect capital to make that move work. Those are the teams that I think would get more of an actual boost from Ohtani than the Rays would.
Yeah. Oh, man. What do you think?
Look, it sucks for... If you're an Angels fan, it's been nothing but pain, but being an Angels fan is nothing but pain. So
yes.
I just have, again, ultimately when it comes to Ohtani, I just have a hard time seeing a team being willing to pony up what it's going to cost to get him. Because the Angels, and nor should they, for as much as you can say the Angels have to accept whatever they can get because they've screwed this up so badly, there is not a rule that says they have to do that. And I think they should get as much for Ohtani as they possibly can. And if they don't get what they want, what does it matter ultimately? Which I know sounds kind of nihilistic. Ultimately, it's like none of this matters. Go eat Arby's, but like, it just doesn't feel like that is the best way to go about this if you're the Angels, which is say, fine, just take him. Whatever, nothing matters anymore. Because the other part of it is, and I don't know how much this matters to the Angels, and I don't necessarily think that keeping Ohtani means that that they keep the fan base, but it's as big of a white flag as you can wave. Particularly for a casual fan to say, hey, this superstar, the best player you'll ever see walk onto the field, we just threw him, we gave him away. What do we get in exchange? 3 guys you'll see in 2.5 years, maybe. Also, because we're not any good at doing that part either, so you're probably not even going to see them anyway. That's also, I think maybe there's a pessimistic part of me that's like, what does it matter who the Angels trade for? They're really bad at this.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who they trade for because their player development system is bad. They're not good at this. They don't know what they're doing. If anything, the value for me is like just throwing the largest number possible to Ohtani and saying, I know we're not good at this, but please, for the love of God, give us a chance. We'll give you more money than anyone else possibly could. I don't think he stays anyway, but I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing it happen for whatever reason. It's just, I think I feel like I said the same thing about Soto, but at least with Soto, it made more sense ultimately because the team that got him, in this case the Padres, knew that it was getting him not just for the second half, but also for the year after that, and giving them an exclusive 18-month negotiating window to try to figure out some kind of long-term contract. With Ohtani, you get only these 2 months, and realistically, unless you're a West Coast team, he's not staying. Which I think the other reason, again, for the Rays not to do is because he is a pure rental for them. And if you're going to go get a pure rental, there are 12 to 15 other guys who will cost a third of what he will cost in terms of outlay, who will make just about as much of a difference going forward, possibly more if you target the areas you need to target, like the bullpen.
Yeah. Go Angels, go Rays, go teams that are definitely going to try and win a World Series this year, John. Speaking of teams who tried to win World Series this year that I don't think are going to win World Series, this can be our final big one here, John. The Mets and the Yankees should both sell. And I think this is a wild situation here in New York. No Subway Series this year. Sad to say, John. But
the tabloids were so excited.
They really were. But for us MLB writers, fans, podcasters, John, the Mets and Yankees both being sellers at the deadline is actually sneaky awesome. Like, because they could do all kinds of crazy shit. Both of these teams can do some real crazy shakeups if they want to. And I'm here for it. Are you at the same place where you're like, it's actually awesome that both these teams might sell? Because there is a lot of intrigue that can happen here.
Look, personally, obviously, the idea of the Yankees saying screw it and not even trying for the postseason, and thus guaranteeing for 16th straight year that there will not be a World Series parade here in New York. Great. Fantastic. My dream lives on. But, look, I think what you said makes sense. I think that particularly for the Mets, who are six games under 500, 17 and a half games out of the division. Their division.
I mean, it's over. The Mets are
dead.
Very done.
They're in real, like, we have their postseason odds at 15%. That's about the same as the Cardinals, which, again, the NL Central, baby. Woo. But they are behind all three teams in the NL East, two of the teams in the NL Central, and three of the teams in the NL West. So that is 8 teams that are currently ahead of them in the postseason race. They're more or less tied with the Cardinals, Cubs, and Padres when it comes to record. So that's another group of teams that they basically have to... I think you're right. The Mets are done. Done.
Yes.
And I think of the two, they are the more likely ones to sell because they have the guys, I think, who, as, granted, they're older, they're expensive, but any team that gets them knows it's going to have them for the long run. And they have Scherzer and Verlander, two established veteran starters with postseason experience. And particularly if the Mets eat enough of those contracts, they can get some real talent in exchange back for them, I think.
Yeah.
One or the other, whatever they decide to do there. When it comes to the rest of the Mets, when it comes to the mess of the Mets roster, the mess that is the Mets roster. You look at who they have, who's going to be set to be a free agent next year. I should note, by the way, Scherzer is technically a free agent next year, but he has a player option for $43 million that he is 1,000,000% going to exercise. So, too bad. But otherwise, I think David Robertson is an obvious candidate to be traded. Only signed to a 1-year deal, will be a free agent next year. Has been very good out of the bullpen for New York. I think he would make a lot of sense for, maybe the Tampa Bay Rays. Similarly, Tommy Pham, who's had a very nice bounce-back season for the Mets, also on a 1-year deal, would be really helpful for any team looking for a right-handed bat off the bench. Ideally, that could slot him into a DH spot so he doesn't have to play the outfield because he is a very, very bad outfielder. Other reliever of interest, Adam Ottavino, I think would make a lot of sense for a team looking for some right-handed setup help in the late innings. Omar Narvaez, now that Francisco Alvarez has more or less taken over as the full-time starting catcher in New York, I think Narvaez would make a lot of sense for a team looking for catcher help. Carlos Carrasco, I think, is the only other major pending free agent that the Mets have. Cannot see him really being of any interest to anyone. He has looked very bad this season. More likely to be a guy that, just exists somewhere down the road for somebody, but maybe Mark Canha, who has a $11.5 million team option with a $2 million buyout for next year. So any team that's getting him would be basically just paying $2 million for the rest of the season. Again, another good corner outfield bat, although one who defensively is not really bringing much to the table. I think the Mets have some real things to offer. Again, led by Verlander and Scherzer. The Yankees, I feel like less so because they have some short-term guys, but short-term guys who I think are less interesting in the grander scheme of things. Josh Donaldson obviously is not going to be an option, particularly given that he suffered a grade 3 calf strain. He is presumably done for the season. You're looking more at Luis Severino, who has been very bad this season and has been dealing with reduced velocity. Does not look right. I can't imagine any team really being willing to take that on for the time being. Frankie Montas, who's not going to be back till September. Can't really see that being a thing that's happening either. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, if you're looking for a decent utility piece, I guess. I don't know. Who really cares? Honestly, I think the two most interesting pieces that this Yankees team has to offer, because, and this is, I think, the difference between the Mets and the Yankees. I think for the Yankees, anything they're doing is a soft sell. It's mostly, hey, does anyone have interest in our pending free agents? Does anyone have interest in guys who are not part of our long-term plan, which I think in this case, you're looking at guys who only have another season of team control left, which is to say Gleyber Torres, Domingo Germán, and a handful of relievers. Maybe you can include Kyle Higashioka on that list, although I don't really think that there's much of any interest there. The other half of that would be, is there anyone interested in a salary dump? And in that case, it's, is anyone willing to take the $45 million we still owe DJ LeMahieu off our hands? Is anyone willing to take the $23 million we still owe Anthony Rizzo for the next 2 seasons off our hands? So, assuming that the answer to the great majority of those is no, I think the two guys who are most likely to move if the Yankees do decide to do a soft sell, one is Harrison Bader, who they acquired last year for Jordan Montgomery at the deadline, a fantastic defensive center fielder, a great base runner, a good power threat. Obviously, the issue is he has a lot of trouble staying healthy, a lot of soft tissue injuries in his past, but has shown the ability, especially in last year's playoffs, to be an impact bat and an impact glove, be a very, very good addition for any team looking for help in center field. The other guy, Wandy Peralta, who'll be a free agent after this season, has been a very good left-handed reliever for the Yankees. Any team that's looking for left-handed relief help, I think, will probably go to the Yankees and see what they want for Peralta. Beyond that, I think you're probably looking, if Gleyber Torres is not going to be part of the Yankees going forward, and given the glut of middle infield prospects they have, I think it's pretty safe to say that Gleyber's time in New York is probably getting close to an end. I do wonder if that's a guy who a team looking for a second baseman or some infield help could use. My question would be, who are those teams? But I think that's a whole other exercise we can maybe get into closer and closer to the deadline. Otherwise, I don't really see what the pieces are here that make sense. Again, unless there's another team willing to eat DJ LeMahieu's salary or Anthony Rizzo's salary in exchange for, sending over a lesser prospect, or if there's a team that's genuinely interested in making a move for someone like, I guess it would have to be Germán or Gleyber Torres or Clay Holmes. One of those 3 guys, all of whom are going to be free agents after the 2024 season, none of whom are presumably go in the Yankees' plans going forward because of age. Safe to say, I think the Yankees would make all 3 of those guys available if they could. I'm curious what they would get back, if anything, for them. But yeah, I mean, look, but even with saying, no, I don't think the Yankees are going to be part of any deadline blockbuster. I think if there's any deadline blockbuster out of any of the 2 New York teams, it would be the Mets giving up on one of Scherzer or Verlander. I think the Yankees are more likely just to try to move their pending free agents on some quieter deals. But there's still some useful players here. Again, particularly Bader and Peralta. I do think if the Yankees decide to throw in the towel for the season, those are the 2 guys who are going to be the most sought after on this roster in terms of guys who I think are realistic chances or have a realistic chance of being moved. Otherwise, I think it'd be more something like, maybe there's someone who's willing to give up a bucket of balls for Domingo Germán, who is certainly has the stuff to be an impact starter, but is not consistent with that. And I think, again, he's already 30 years old. He's going to be a free agent after next season. I can't really see him being a long-term contract guy with the Yankees. I think it makes sense for them to get whatever they can for him while he still has that value of being a guy that the team knows will be part of their plans for next season. In that vein, I think a team like Cincinnati could really use a guy like Germán. I think a team like Milwaukee similarly would be in on a guy like Germán, because the other part of it is he's only making $2.5 million this year, and he's arbitration eligible next year. Realistically, he's only going to come in maybe at $4.5 million. That's very reasonable money for a back of the rotation starter. I think it would make a lot of sense for some of those smaller teams that are very much fixated on cost control, like the NL Central teams. Or maybe I would say Baltimore. If Baltimore were in a division, maybe more for a team like Texas if it wants to add some starting depth, or a team like the Giants or the Padres if they want to add some starting depth. Regardless, that's kind of what I expect out of the Yankees. I think with the Mets, it's going to be the go big or go home of Scherzer and Verlander, while also looking to see if anyone's interested in particular, David Robertson and Adam Ottavino, I think, are the two most likely guys from the Mets to be moved, as well as I think probably Tommy Pham. Although Pham's reputation, for lack of a better word, certainly precedes him in this case, and I think might complicate some stuff for the Mets too, because I don't know that anyone really wants to deal with the whole Tommy Pham experience, given how many teams he has burned bridges with over the course of the last several years.
I'm going to make a prediction. I think the Yankees do a skinny rebuild, like you said. Dump some salary if they can. See,
and I think the important thing to note there is we've already started to get the news stories, presumably sourced from within the Yankees front office and ownership, that they're looking to avoid that third tier, the luxury tax.
Yeah.
The only way they could do that, obviously, is to shed as much salary as they can.
The Mets, though, I think they trade one of Verlander, Scherzer. I don't know which one, but I think one of them is moved this summer. I don't know which one.
I think both will be. I think both will be on the market. I think the Mets will listen to any and all offers for either of them, because there's no combination of moves at this point that they can make to reset, their luxury tax issues.
Yeah,
that's just and that will just be an ongoing problem for them so long as Steve Cohen wants to spend money. But I think it would make. I think if you're looking at anyone,
here's what the best for baseball is, John.
What's that?
Max Scherzer to the Tampa Bay and Justin Verlander to Baltimore.
That would be a lot of fun. And look, I think if you're the Mets and you want to focus on moving one over the other, you're guaranteed. I mean, the problem, I guess, is Verlander is guaranteed $43 million next year with a vesting option.
Who cares? The Orioles don't have anybody on the book.
No. I'm not saying for the team acquiring them. I'm saying if you're the Mets, who are you kind of more interested in trying to move in terms of saving the money? But the problem is Verlander is guaranteed that $43 million next year. Scherzer, for all intents and purposes, is, because he has a player option he can exercise, which he will do, because there's no way, shape, or anything in which he goes back onto the free agent market after the season he's had at the age of 39. This is a guy who's going to play that next season out, and I would be curious. I think it'll obviously depend on how the rest of this season goes, and next, whether or not 2024 might be the end for Max Scherzer. I think similarly for Verlander, whether or not his final year under contract, assuming he doesn't reach those vesting options, makes him more likely to call it quits after 2024 as well. I think if you're a team looking to acquire them, you're probably more interested in Verlander because you do have him under control for a full season after that. I guess you could say the same of Scherzer, though, anyway. I don't know. Ultimately, I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other as to which of them gets moved, if either. But I do think the Mets will probably try to see who, if anyone, is interested. Similarly, if you're looking at potential salary dumps for them, I think Starling Marte is a guy they might try to push heavily on other teams to see if anyone's interested. That's really the only guy, with the exception of Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo, who is making big long-term money going forward, and Edwin Diaz, obviously, but I don't think anyone's going to trade for Diaz coming off his knee injury as it is, particularly because next season is the final season of arbitration eligibility for Pete Alonso, which means that will be his final season under team control. The Mets 1,000,000% need to figure out some kind of long-term contract with him this offseason. And in order to do that, they have to try to free up some of that money that's currently going to that Verlander, Scherzer, Marte troika. So I think the incentive for them will be heavy to try to move one of those guys. Whereas on the Yankee side of things, they've already got Judge locked up long-term. There aren't really any other long-term contract candidates on that roster, depending on what they want to do with Anthony Volpe, obviously, and depending on how Jason Dominguez comes out of the gate, whenever it is they call him up. I think they're a little more settled in what they want to do. I think the priority there is just, like you said, the skinny rebuild, bring in some younger guys, make some space on the roster for some younger guys as well. I think that would be part of the idea of trading Gleyber Torres, is to give Oswald Peraza some consistent playing time at second base and see if he can be the guy in the middle infield. If not him, figure out something with Oswaldo Cabrera, maybe something figure out with Jose Peraza. Regardless, I think there's a really, really good chance both of those teams are sellers at this deadline, because I think, like you said, the Mets are just out of it. I don't think there's any real chance the Mets make the playoffs. The Yankees, for as much as they still have a good shot, the AL East is a gauntlet. The Astros and Rangers are not going away. There will be an AL Central team involved somewhere in this of some level. It's a really, really tough race for them going forward. The thing I think that separates the Mets and the Yankees here, though, and why I think the Yankees would do the soft rebuild, is they're going to get Aaron Judge back at some point. That will be obviously a huge boon for them. I think there's still a chance that even if they do sell, they can be a playoff team. But I think this would be a good opportunity for them to shed to get something back for those pending free agents who they're not going to get anything back for in exchange when they leave, assuming they don't sign them long term, which I don't think they will, and also see if a guy like Torres or Herman or anyone else of that ilk, or maybe again if LeMahieu or Rizzo is appealing to anybody, get out from under those contracts and start trying to figure out what a new Yankees kind of core looks like. Because I think that's kind of the other part of this with the Yankees is kind of the admission that this core needs a change at this point. What Brian Cashman has been doing the last years has just not worked in collectively. That offense has just not succeeded, with the exception of Judge over particularly the last 18 months, but really since I think the midpoint of 2021. I think if anything, you make those deals to try to shake that roster up and figure out some new avenues to go by. We'll see. It's going to be really interesting. And I think the Mets are the likeliest to make the biggest splash in all of that with moving potentially one of Scherzer or Verlander. Although I should note, Mets fans, you guys should probably prepare yourselves now for the fact that neither of Scherzer or Verlander is going to bring back much in the way of prospects. It's really not going to happen.
But David Stearns is probably on the way in December. That'll be nice.
Who knows? I mean, I think if anything, I think if you're the Mets, forget Shohei Ohtani. You're probably looking over to NPB right now and asking Yoshinobu Yamamoto's agents, so what's it going to take? We've already got Kodai Senga. Doesn't he want to join Kodai Senga? I think it's more realistic that they go for the next, well, not the next Ohtani. No one is the next Ohtani. But given that, again, I don't think Ohtani goes to an East Coast team. If you're the Mets, go after the big... I mean, especially, again, also, they need to free up money for Pete Alonso. They need to figure that out. He is a centerpiece of that offense. They have to lock him up long-term. It's going to be a really ugly contract by the end because right-handed first basemen do not exactly age particularly well. Regardless, the Mets don't have a choice. They have to lock down Alonso. And in order to do that, they need to try to move as much salary as they can between now and ideally the beginning of the 2024 season.
There you go. Jon Tayler, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Fangraphs.com this week?
I'd like to note, by the way, the Yankees are currently down 4-0 to the Angels. Luis Rengifo just hit a home run, which I didn't know was a thing that could happen. Regardless, what can the good folks check out from us at Fangraphs? Currently ongoing our 2023 Trade Value Series. That is our annual series where we rank the top 50 players in baseball based on their trade value, which is calculated using a combination of salary, age, performance, projected performance, all that fun stuff. Ben Clemens is writing that. He's done a fantastic job so far. We are through, we're up to number 21 as of today, Wednesday. 20 through 11 will be out on Thursday, then the top 10 on Friday, so check that out if you haven't yet. Beyond that, the other upcoming series, or the other series we have that is going to start actually on Friday, Jay Jaffe's Replacement Level Killers, where he's going to be looking at the various contenders by position to see who needs... who's got issues at particular positions, who's getting dragged down by replacement level or worse players, and how those teams might be able to improve themselves. I think that series is a really, really good primer for the deadline in terms of seeing which contenders need help where. Make sure to check that out as well. If you're interested in projections, Dan Szymborski has been going through his 2023 midseason Zips projections to look at not only the standings and the updated standings based on the projections for the rest of the season, but also the projections for individual players for 2023 and beyond. Check that out if you're at all interested in that. Otherwise, we'll be here for deadline stuff. We'll be all on top of that. We've got a top 100 prospect update coming from Eric Longenhagen at some point in the near future. Also really good ahead of the trade deadline to get a sense of who the big prospect names might be that get moved. So come on over to Fangraphs. While you're there, sign up for a membership. It is $10 a month or $60 a year for ad-free browsing, plus some other perks. Go follow us on Twitter if you're still bothering with that. Go follow us on Blue Sky. I may start a Threads account for Fangraphs, but who knows? I don't like Facebook, and I don't want to deal with their crap. Fangraphs.com. Deal with our crap instead.
There you go. I love it.
The Orioles, by the way, I should note, we've been talking about how the Orioles want to make a trade for a pitcher. They went ahead and did it. The Baltimore Orioles have acquired Oakland A's right-handed reliever Shintaro Fujinami.
Oh. Go Orioles.
But they did it. They did it.
Mission accomplished. Raise the banner.
We have dropped the banner. Drop the banner. Drop the balloons. The Orioles did it.
They're done.
They're good
there
now.
You go. Go Baltimore.
They're very
Jon Tayler,
good.
Always a pleasure, and I will talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.